strangely, I guess, a metaphor for Hamilton the play, in that Lin-Manuel Miranda's father, he is a political consultant who barters these deals on his home island of Puerto Rico. And he's really representing a bunch of like very, very, very wealthy white, Wall Street hedge funders.
Manhattan. I mean,
I'm Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And they run this.
Dad lives in Manhattan now. I mean,
yes.
But exactly. So one thing that was kind of funny about, I wrote a piece of legislation on how to deal with Puerto Rico. But I want to explain how actual the bailout that Hamilton engineered was so important. So a lot of people make the argument that Hamilton was trying to pay off the national debt and he had to assume state debts and make them federal. So that was one of the first laws passed after the Constitution was ratified, the Assumption Act, to bring all the state debts and make them federal. Well, one of the things that happened, that was what Tim Geithner referred to when he called it the first bailout. One of the things that happened is that Alexander Hamilton, like the Continental Congress and the states had been paying soldiers with IOUs, aka these state debts. And these these soldiers were basically, these debts were useless. And they went back to their farms and became, they were farmers. And these IOUs were worth nothing. And so Hamilton starts engineering this plan to have the federal government assume these debts and then gain the taxing power so they could pay their bonds. And that would make all of these bonds and these IOUs worth 100 cents on the dollar. So Hamilton told his buddies, hey, go throughout the country and get the farmers to sell you their IOUs for pennies on the dollar, and then they'll be worth 100 cents on the dollar. And that's what happened. And they instantly created a whole crop of millionaires who were Alexander Hamilton's political allies. That was his strategy to build the Federalist Party, is you will have the wealthy, you will create a wealthy class of aristocratic financiers. Some of them will have military power. So a lot of officers had a bunch of bonds. And then that would create the backbone of a great new empire. That was Alexander Hamilton's genius plan for statecraft. It is a real plan. It was what England was doing, or it was, Great Britain. And that's what Geithner was mimicking, right, in 2009. Like, that's what they were doing. That they believe the power of America comes from the union, the backbone of Wall Street, the fluid capital markets, as David Brooks put it, the engine of capitalism, which I don't think is the engine of capitalism, but that's what these financiers, and this strong, powerful, aggressive, expansionist military class. Now, I don't want to overstate what Hamilton did when he created that, because Jefferson did win in 1800 and radically ramped a lot of that stuff down. And America, throughout the 19th century, did, like, it was within extreme limits of extraordinary racism, and it was a Republican democratic. It was a democratic republic, right? It was. So it's not. I don't want to overstate how much damage Hamilton did, but that is what his vision was, and that's why they loved him. A lot of the people that loved him in 2016.
It's buying distressed assets, to delivering them to your cronies, and having an extraordinary amount of power over modern day peasants, and using their labor. I mean, it really is, actually, it did work out at the end of the day.
Yeah, but if you believe, as I think Hamilton did, and Robert Morris and a bunch of the people in that era, and I think Geithner too, like, there's a view that, like, the people can't handle it, right? There's a view of technocrats believe that the public isn't smart enough to know what's good for them. People at Google believe this, we're going to organize the world's information, like they'll organize it for you. There's an implicit, a lot of the top bankers believe this, And so if you believe that people are not smart enough to handle their own politics, then a lot of this stuff seems really natural, because what you would want to do is put power in the hands of experts. And experts are often people who have a lot of money, right? And, I wrote a piece showing that the Federal Reserve, every single governor of the Federal Reserve, the 20 governors, actually every single governor is a multimillionaire, which is a problem, because the Federal Reserve is supposed to handle credit allocation. And you probably want some people on there that have experience with student debt or credit card debt or being harassed by a debt collector. So you don't want everybody on there to be like that, but you also don't want everybody to be a multimillionaire, because then specifically to own certain financial assets, because then they're only going to see the world in one particular way. You want a diversity of views. And I got some pushback. Most people were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I did get some pushback from people who said, well, do you really want people that don't have any money to be on the Federal Reserve? And people who are good at dealing with money are going to be rich. And so that's who you're going to want to put at the Federal Reserve. And it was like this interesting dynamic where there really is a strong belief that people who are winners, who are powerful and successful, that they're powerful and successful because of their own merit, and they're the natural sort of ruling class, and they should rule. And the rest of us should just sort of suck it up. And of course, it's, there's a lot of problems with that, mostly that there's not that much social mobility anymore. So people are often
oblivious to systemic issues.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they inherit it, or they have been born in the right place at the right time. But fundamentally, you have a country which I think is like kind of tearing itself apart. I think that's kind of what we're seeing now. Is that. So anyway.
No, that's exactly it. It's interesting to see how Hamilton comes out at this moment, and rightfully should get the pushback for this specific moment.
Yeah.
With so many protests.
It is funny because one thing I have noticed, when I wrote that original piece, it kind of went viral, and there's sort of this group of people that hated the bailouts, and on the Democratic side, right? Like there's a bunch of the right wingers, and they're kind of engaging in bad faith because Bush was a big part of the bailouts. But there were some of us that thought these foreclosures are really awful and the bailouts were really terrible. And we hated Hamilton, right? Not that I hated the play, because the songs are great. My niece loves it, and all these kids love it, so whatever. But what they were trying, the politics of Hamilton, like a lot of people like me, we had the feeling that something is off. And I spent 6 months to try to figure it out and wrote this piece. And a lot of people were like, okay, that's right. That says what I feel is off about this. But the play, the Disney Plus version, which just came out, what I'm noticing is that a lot of people are saying, I saw Hamilton when it came out years ago, and I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. And, it's great. It's really fun to watch, but it feels like a different era. And so there is a sense, I'm just like, well, I still feel the same way. I hated it then, I hate it now, right? And there is like the sense that sort of same atmosphere of like kind of Obama, I got this, don't worry, it's all good. That's over. I mean, for a lot of reasons, not all of which are good, but like that's over. And so it's getting this sort of reception of like, oh, this guy's awesome. And like the political class is kind of like making arguments about Hamilton in really annoying ways. It's not the same. I mean, and by the way, Hillary Clinton, I think, quoted Hamilton, the play, in her nominating speech in 2016. I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy, the amount of it. And you still see it, but like you also see Democrats wearing those like kente scarves. So it's like, it's weird and out of touch, but like in 2016, it wasn't out of touch. And I was like on the outs. And now it's like, oh, okay, it's cool to dislike Hamilton, which is kind of nice to see. I mean,
kids should understand that. Like, if you have kids and they're watching it, make sure to give them the full, picture of who Hamilton was. But luckily, these kids will have other art to watch that possibly is a little bit more integrated in this moment, rather than it's like sitting down and making your kids watch Friends or Seinfeld and going back and looking at it later. Like, why are there no people of color? This is New York.
I remember, so we watched Friends recently, my wife and I, and yeah, it's very noticeable, right? That it's a pretty diverse, or it's pretty wide show. But the other thing that's interesting about it, which was more stark, because we do notice, like, there is dialogue about racial diversity. There is class diversity in Friends. Rachel's a waitress, right? And they're all. She's
also rich. She came from a rich father. I love that we're getting into this.
Is there's an episode where she like dates a rich guy. Like, it's just interesting because I did not realize in my own lifetime how much more of a class split there is today than there was 20 years ago, right? Yes, there's definitely problematic racial dynamics there. It's just another interesting like I'm just surprised. Like, I don't remember when I was a kid. Like, I remember having like working class people in my social network, and that's just not true today, right? It's just like it seems like it's a very different society than it was when, you know.
And you know, to keep in mind that in the 2000s, much like the Roaring 20s, you had this roaring, supposed, you know, fake roaring economy in New York. I mean, right before this segment, I interviewed Kate Berkeley from the Daily Beast about Epstein, and so much of what Epstein, his power was ridden on this like social class of party goers in New York. And I think a lot of the 2000 era TV shows from Sex and the City and Friends was like, it illustrated like that was, I don't know. I mean, there were major racial divides, but Manhattan then was more affordable than it is now, even in COVID. And yet there was this like, just this egregious wealth that was just like thrown in your face, like the 80s and the 20s. So anyways, super, super interesting. And of course, Wall Street and the slave trade, where Manhattan, you know, was born.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing, is that Wall Street was the, people think South Carolina was the first state to secede, but the second was the island of Manhattan during the Civil War. So
yeah,
people forget, they don't know that, but that was true. So
Matt, really interesting stuff. Hopefully we can cancel Hamilton soon. I'm not a big fan of canceling, but you know, every once in a while you got to cancel some propaganda. Thank you for watching and listening to the Nomiki Show. Make sure to click like and subscribe on YouTube and share with everybody on social media. And of course, if you're not a patron already, please join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for as low as $5 a month. That money makes a huge difference. We don't have the corporate money coming in. We're not cable news that's raking in the dough from advertisers right now as everybody's sitting at home and watching. It is really you guys who are keeping us together. So please consider being a patron. And for those of you who have already, we are incredibly grateful to you.